Hello and aloha to all the Baha'is of the world. Time is 9:27 on 7th of June, Tuesday. This is the final speech that I have for you to show you what's in the writing about the guardianship. In order to understand this video, you have to listen to the previous two. Anyways, if you have listened to the first two, I would continue to tell you that as Shoghi Effendi passed away in 1957, Hands of the Cause of God, 9 of them, including Mason Remy, they were kind of selected from the 27th of Hands of the Cause. They select these 9 to go and check to find out if Shoghi Effendi had any successors, any son, anything. They couldn't find nothing, and they signed and sealed it. So Hands of the Cause of God, since they were not infallible anywhere in the book, they decided that to such a big problem of not having a successor after Shoghi Effendi, they're not able to convince the Baha'is for any particular answer. So they decided to ask all the Baha'is of the world to elect at the first Universal House of Justice in 1963. Since it's all the writing, it says that they are infallible. The Universal House of Justice as a whole is infallible. An infallible institution, person, persona is necessary to answer to this, to finalize it. They did that, and in 1963, it was elected, and the Universal House of Justice said that we cannot appoint any guardian or legislate any laws to make this appointment as possible. But many Baha'is were not convinced. Around 1966, about 3 years after, as why Shoghi Effendi did not have a successor, this answer was given by the Universal House of Justice. On 27th of May 1966, and I quote, "You suggest a possibility that, for the good of the cause, certain information concerning successions to Shoghi Effendi is being withheld from the believers. We assure you that nothing whatsoever is being withheld from the friends for whatever reason. There's no doubt at all that in the will and the testament of Abdul-Baha, Shoghi Effendi was the authority designated to appoint his successor, but he had no children, and all the surviving axon broken the covenant. Thus, as the Hands of the Cause stated in 1957, it is clear that there was no one he could have appointed in accordance with the provisions of the will. To have made an appointment outside the clear and specific provisions of the Master's will and testament would obviously have been an impossible and unthinkable course of action for the guardian." Now, this is clearly an interpretation, although they quote Hands of the Cause of God, but they add themselves that this is a Baha'i, I think, in Holland, and he says maybe for the good of cause you didn't want to tell us, who is in charge. And Universal said, no, there's nobody. We're not hiding anything, and they were not hiding. But they come back and say that Shoghi Effendi could have not appointed anybody. Why? Because he had no son, one, and then other members of the Baha'u'llah's family, they were all broken the covenant. B, Shoghi Effendi could not go against the word of Abdul-Baha, because Abdul-Baha says he has to appoint his own son or somebody of one of the Aqsan. This is what Abdul-Baha said to Shoghi Effendi, or in the writing, that this is what Shoghi has to do. So Universal says that Shoghi Effendi could not go against the will of the masters known as Abdul Baha, and do. That's impossible. Well, that's totally absurd. It just shows the lack of understanding of the cause of God. The office and the position of the Shoghi Effendi as an infallible interpreter is exactly what Abdul Baha has. You might want to think that they were of different stature. Sure. But when it comes to interpretation, they are both authorities, equal. And as said before, on the last videos, Shoghi Effendi can alter in any which way that he deems to be necessary the word of Abdul Baha. So Shoghi Effendi is not the boss boy of Abdul Baha to tell him okay what to do. In that case, he cannot be really an independent interpreter. He would be an assistant. He would be a lower. When there are two people infallible, one cannot be higher than the other one. So this is an interpretation. So some people, when they're objecting to them that universal laws of justice, you're saying that you should not interpret, they answer and say that, no, we're not interpreting universal laws of justice. We are elucidating. For you to know, elucidate means to explain. Based on the writings. If you don't understand a part of the writing, you can use the writings to say to that person that Abdul Baha Shoghi Effendi has said something else. But if you go of your own, try to create an answer, then you're interpreting. Elucidation means you just say that, okay, you don't understand what this means. I'm not going to change the meaning or interpret it. I'll just bring you another writing of Abdul Baha Shoghi Effendi to explain about the same subject. Then the matter is clear. If the holy writing answers itself, is elucidations. But if you answer of your own the meaning of the word or what that means, then you're interpreting. So that's what they say to this fellow. I'm quoting again. Let's see, what is this? This message is Universal Laws of Justice, Department of Secretary, 27th of August, 1998, to an individual. Quote, the meaning of the terms elucidation and interpretation as they are used with regard to the function of the Baha'í institution should not, of course, be confused with each other. The elucidations of the universal laws of justice stem from its legislation function, and as such differ from interpretation. The divinely inspired legislations of the House of Justice does not attempt to say what the revealed word means. It states what must be done in case where the revealed text or its authoritative interpretation is not explicit. So this is what they say. We can't tell you what it means, the word of Shoghi Effendi or Abdul. But you just said that the action of Abdul Baha is because he didn't have anybody to appoint. You're saying God does not have any other person to continue his faith? There's a shortage of mankind? Or Shoghi Effendi has to obey Abdul Baha? And what do you think obedience means? That's not the case. So that's interpretation. Then they go on, continue, quote, and in this context, it offers explanation. It is therefore on quite a different level from the sacred text, and the universal laws of justice is empowered to abrogate or amend its own legislations whenever it judges the conditions make this desirable. The major distinction between the two functions of the elucidation interpretations, to repeat the point differently, it is that legislation with its resultant outcome of elucidation is susceptible of amendment by the House of Justice itself, whereas the guardian's interpretation is a statement of the truth which cannot be varied. Well, this is what they say. But in the previous statement, they just said simply Abdul-Baha, Shoghi Effendi could have not go against the word of Abdul-Baha and what was in there to appoint. Like they're closing the hand of Shoghi Effendi based on what Abdul-Baha has said. Well, that is interpretations and a very wrong one. That does not go in the Baha'i writing. If Shoghi Effendi have to exactly say whatever Abdul-Baha said, what for he is there then? Baha'is could have done that perfectly themselves. He is there to say other things as the time comes. So they tell them about where did you get this power of elucidations, universal laws of justice. They bring this part of the word of Abdul-Baha as a reason. And this is what they say, quote, "This is the writing of Abdul-Baha in Will and Testament, and this is what universal laws of justice has brought as a reason for the elucidation. It is incumbent upon these members of the Universal House of Justice to deliberate upon all problems which has caused difference, questions that are obscure, and matters that are not expressly recorded in the book, and bear upon daily transaction." And then, so this is in the Will and Testament. But in Will and Testament, this answer that they've given, it seems very partial, because they are not saying everything is in that power. I'm going to bring the whole thing from you, for you, in the Will and Testament. This is Will and Testament now about the same subject of elucidation of where universal house of justice stands. Quote, "And now concerning the house of justice which God had ordained as the source of all goods and freed from all error, it must be elected by the universal suffrage, that is, by the believers. Its member must be manifestations of the fear of God and day springs of the knowledge and understanding, must be steadfast in God's faith and well-wishers of all mankind. By this house is meant the universal house of justice, that is, in all countries a secondary house of justice must be instituted, and this secondary house of justice must elect the members of the universal one. And to this body all things must be referred. It enacted all the ordinances and regulations that are not to be found in the explicit holy text. By this body all the difficult problems are to be resolved, and the guardian of the cause of God is its sacred head and the distinguished member for life of that body." Yes, everything about universal laws of justice is correct, except that for the universal laws of justice, as Abdul-Baha explained, there has to have a head called Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the cause, has to be there for the life, for the entire existence of universal laws of justice. Should he not attend in person its deliberation, he must appoint one to represent him. There you go. He does not say it should be an axon, it should not be a holy family. It says if Abdul-Baha is not there, he has to represent somebody else in his place to do his job. Should any of the members commit a sin injurious to the commonwealth, the guardian of the cause of God hath at his own discretion the right to expel him, whereupon the people must elect another one in his stead. The House of Justice enacted the laws, and the government enforced them. The legislative body must reinforce the executive must aid and assist the legislative body, so that through the close union and harmony of these two forces, the foundation of the fairness and justice may become firm and strong. You refer it yourself and read it yourself. So universal laws of justice is a legislative power that has to have Shoghi Effendi as a sacred head, guardian as a sacred head. If not, somebody has to put in his person. Okay, and the government, Baha'i government, perhaps, has to execute these laws that they enact, if all the people in one country are Baha'is, of course. So here again we see universal laws of justice cannot work on its own. It needs another one. Okay? So again, this elucidation that they're saying is incomplete. So because this matter of elucidation comes, I thought, okay, I'm going to elucidate for you instead of interpret, which I'm supposed to. I don't need to interpret. This matter is clear in the writing. I elucidate it. If you want to elucidate the subject of guardianship, well, then you have to bring all the writings about this matter of guardianship. There are not that many, really few pages. To put them all together and connect the dots, then you get the answer. Okay. The first thing we have to know is that the reason that Shoghi Effendi, if you want to find a reason, that Shoghi Effendi did not have a son and appointed anyone, the answer to this is this. This is what it is as a face value. We cannot say why. Only we can see in the writing of Kitab Aqdas, this Aqsan, which is the Holy Family, would have to come to an end. Nobody was expecting Shoghi Effendi is the first and the last. But nevertheless, even there are 5, 10, 100, whatever, at one point they will not be around. And Universal has to take the power in its hand. And this is the word of Kitab Aqdas, He says, and I quote, endowments dedicated to the charity revert to God, the revealer of sign. None had the right to dispose of them without the leave from him who is the dawning place of the revelation. That means every benevolence has to go to Baha'u'llah. After him, this authority shall pass to Aqsan, which is the Holy Family, Abdul Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and if there are others. And after them to the House of Justice, should it be established in the world by then, that they may use the endowment for the benefit of the places which have been exalted in the cause, and for whatsoever had been enjoined upon them by him who is the God of might and power. Otherwise the endowment shall revert to the people of Baha, who speak not except by his leave, and judge not save in accordance with which God had decreed in the tablet. So Baha'u'llah says endowment comes to me. When I'm gone, my family, Holy Family, Abdul Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and if they are not there, it has to go to universal laws of justice. That means at one point there cannot be a Holy Family member. This is one of the reasons Baha'u'llah already says that. Therefore, we cannot argue that why Shoghi Effendi did not have anybody else. It was predicted anyways. And that, lack of that, allows the universal laws of justice to come in existence. This is the best reason, if you want to know. Shoghi Effendi didn't have anybody because he wanted, after him, the universal laws of justice come into power. There was no universal laws of justice. Baha'u'llah has predicted that too. He says, in that case, go to the people who speaks by the power of God. Well, they were hands of the cause of God. 27 of them. And they established the House of Justice. But, nevertheless, the House of Justice would have to, as I said, work with the Universal House of Guardianship, with the institution of guardianship. So far we find out, basically, Shoghi Effendi did not have a son. There was nobody from the Holy Family to be called infallible. But there were 5 elders. We read that. But the question is that, so 5 elders, I'm one of them. They come and die. Then what? Then what do we do then? This is where general guardianship comes, because it says, I'll quote it again, guardian of the cause of God is a sacred head and a distinguished member of the life of that body. Should not he attend in its deliberation, he must appoint one to represent him. So for the life of the universal laws of justice, you need guardians in it. And Shoghi Effendi did not choose anybody to represent him, because there was no universal laws of justice. But the fact and the truth of matter has to continue, which means there can't be a universal laws of justice if there is no universal laws of guardianship to work with it. So this matter has to go in the hand of the Baha'is. Guardianship is a test. Not test as in I'm testing you to fail you. No. It is a fact that when the teacher teaches you something for so many years, then he conducts a test. So that not he, but you to know, as a pupil, as a student, how are you doing? What was the result? Somebody has to tell you whether you passed, whether you're understanding, whether you have reached to understanding. This is what the meaning of the test is in the faith and in the writing. Because if there's no test, so no one knows. A lot of people, they're losing their status because they say that, look, we did all of this thing and nothing happened. Test comes, so they pass the test. They get martyred, they lose their money, whatever. Then they find out themselves that we're different from others. This is what the test means. And guardianship is a test. After Baha'i faith is revealed, now God wants to know if we understand what to do. And I'll tell you right now the writing. I quote, this is from Shoghi Effendi in The Light of Guidance, page 3110. Acceptance of the day, of that day, acceptance of the day that will not be followed by night. This is the word of Abdul-Baha. The day that will not be followed by night. Shoghi Effendi is accepting this. He feels that, he means Shoghi Effendi feels that, if ponder more deeply about the fundamentals of divine revelation, she will also come to understand the guardianship. Once the mind and heart have grasped the fact that God guides men through a mouthpiece, a human being, a prophet, infallible and unerring, it's only a logical projection of this acceptance to also accept the station of Abdul-Baha and the guardians. Guardians. The guardians are the evidence of the maturity of mankind, that at long last men have to progress to the point of having one world and needing one world management for human affairs. In the spiritual realm, they have also reached the point where God could live in human hands, i.e. the guardians, guided directly by the Bab and Baha'u'llah. As the Master stated in his will and testament, the affair of his fate for this dispensation, this is what it meant by this is the day that will not be followed by night. In this dispensation, divine guidance flows unto us in this world after the Prophet ascension, through first the Master, which is Abdul-Baha, and then the guardians. If a person can accept Baha'u'llah's function, it should not present any difficulty to them to also accept what he has ordained divinely guided individuals in the matter pertaining to his faith. This is the end. He says that. If you believe God, the unknowable, comes through Baha'u'llah and talk to us, it just makes sense. How would God contact us? It has to be somebody like us. He has to manifest himself in that. So it says Baha'u'llah is gone. Well, of course he will continue his revelation through divinely guided individual, i.e. human being, ordinary human being. That's all of the Baha'is. They would come. And these Baha'is, this is now my projection, as they were in Islam, thousands of them, in Christianity, like Saint Augustine, for example, in Islam, like Rumi, like Attar. In the Baha'i faith, there will be millions, from everywhere in the world. Just imagine the population of the earth as opposed to time of Islam. These individuals, they are working with universal house of guardianship. They have the power to interpret, but their interpretation is left with universal laws of guardianship, not universal laws of justice. Universal laws of justice cannot interpret, cannot even understand the meaning. They're not allowed as an institution. So universal laws of guardianship use the scientists, these people, any kind, from music to everything. Consulting with them, they bring up the meaning of the faith hidden in it, which has to be according to science and logic. This is why the faith has to be according to science and logic, because we have to make it. We, Baha'is, through the house of guardianship. And the house of guardianship, universal house of guardianship, is the one speaks on behalf of the Shoghi Effendi. It is the representing Shoghi Effendi. Just like universal laws of justice, that they know the laws of Baha'u'llah, they cannot abrogate those, but they can bring new laws. Universal laws of guardianship consists of 5 women elected by all the Baha'is in the world. They will also cannot abrogate the interpretations of Shoghi Effendi and Abdul Baha, but they continue that by the new interpretations according to the science and logic, using all these guardians from all aspects of knowledge and light. And they are all divinely guided by Baha'u'llah. This is what it says. I don't know what's the problem, that we don't understand the mistakes that universal laws of justice is making, and that we don't understand this fact. This is all about, my talk is all about this. I'm not trying to create problem in your head, It's very important. There are some of the elucidation continues. Shoghi Effendi says, if Baha'i faith, as it is right now, represent without what is written in the book, you get it partial, as Muslim and Christian they do, it will not achieve the great peace in the world. The minor plan of God will fail. This is what it says, Shoghi Effendi, World Order of Baha'u'llah, page 162. No machinery falling short of the standard inculcated by the Baha'i revelations and at a variance with the sublime pattern ordained in his teachings, which the collective efforts of mankind may yet devise, can ever hope to achieve anything above or beyond that lesser peace, to which the author of our faith has alluded in his writings. Whatever we do, whatever we devise, it will not make us to go more than lesser peace, which means a social, economical peace, not a spiritual. Okay? And some of the Baha'is that they think, we don't need administrations. A friend of mine thinks like that. Shoghi Effendi says it's impossible. Again, World Order of Baha'u'llah, page 5. To disassociate the administrative principles of the cause from the purely spiritual and humanitarian teaching would be a tantamount to mutilations of the body of the cause, a separation that can only result in disintegration of its component part and the extinctions of the faith itself. No universal laws of justice, no universal laws of guardianship. If it is incomplete, it will not go more than lesser peace. And if you say we don't want them at all because they're all fighting together, as some people they say, then there will be no Baha'i faith. It will be extinct. Then, again, back to the use of this institution of guardianship. Without such a Shoghi Effendi, page 148, without such an institution, the integrity of the faith will be imperiled. If you don't have the universal laws of guardianship, the faith is a danger. And the stability of the entire fabric would be gravely endangered. It is right now already. Its prestige would suffer. There has been no Baha'i teaching after Shoghi Effendi died. Jehovah's Witnesses are everywhere in every city, Baha'is are not. They were just as long as that time. They should have done thousands times more. They all say entirely BS. Baha'is are talking sense, science. We haven't gone there because it suffered. But it says, continue, the means required to enable it to take a long and uninterrupted view over the series of generations would be completely lacking. We cannot foresee nothing. And finally, he puts the hammer on. And the necessary guidance to define the sphere of the legislative action of its elected representative would be totally withdrawn. The elected representative, which are the universal laws of justice, they need a necessary guidance. The guidance simply you saw, it's lacking, and that's why they make these fallacious elucidations, which is all interpretations. I'm not objecting at them. I'm saying it's a sheer ignorance. Just simply say that we have no answer. This is what it is. Take it or leave it. Or if you elucidate, why don't you bring all these writings that I'm bringing today for you to the others? That's elucidation. So you don't answer of your own. Bring the other answer. So in the relationship of the universal laws of justice to the guardianship, again, Shoghi was supposed to be there. The guardian was supposed to be there, that if they say something that is not within the writing, he would ask them to change. That's exactly what the universal laws of guardianship will do. If they want to bring a legislation, a universal laws of guardianship, which is comprised of these women in the future get elected, they tell them this is outside of the law. They give the necessary guidance. On the other hand, the universal laws of guardianship, which is the interpreting the writing, they need the seal of approval of the universal laws of justice to say this interpretation is authoritative. Based on that authoritative interpretation, they legislate new laws. Without it, it's impossible. World Order of Baha'u'llah, page 150. But it is bound to insist, guardian is bound to insist upon a consideration by them of any enactment he consciously believes to conflict with the meaning and to depart from the spirit of Baha'u'llah's revealed utterances. He's there to say that. So he chose one in his place. There are 5 elders, which he mentioned they're coming, and then the guardians, which is a sign of maturity, he says. Okay? It's very interesting that there's actually a building designated for it. If Shoghi Effendi did not have a son, he did not choose, why does he say there has to be a house of guardianship, a physical building? Why would he say that? Clearly, he talks about future guardians, as universal laws of justice accepts that. Well, then clearly this building is not standing here in vain. There must be somebody coming in it. It's in a Persian book called Toghiyat Mubarakeh, printed in 1992 in Germany at Baha'i Verlag. This book in the compilations of the Persian messages of Shoghi Effendi, dating from 88 to 113 of the Baha'i calendar, in which he says the following in the page 562, and I did this translation. In this place, he talks about 5 buildings. He talks about Dar Tashri, Dar means house, the House of Legislative, which is universal laws of justice. Then he talks about Dar al-Asar, Dar means the house, Asar means writing, museum, basically, archive. Then the 3rd building, this is what it is. At the precinct of these 2 lofty buildings, which is the Baha'i Archive and seat of universal laws of justice, and these 2 mighty pillars, another building, which is the House of Guardianship, within bracket in Arabic, Darul Velayah. and the center of the interpretation, explanations, and commentary of the holy text, in confirmation and complementation to the legislative arm, gradually shall be erected. What more you want? To know that the guardianship has to continue after Shoghi Effendi, by the hand of people, ordinary people, i.e. the guardians, which is a sign of maturity of the Baha'is. The question, of course, is who's going to do it? Because every Baha'i says, I'm a part of it. No, there are 5 elders. I'm one of them. Just as the hands of the cause of God were there to order to erect the universal laws of justice, that was not the end of the game. No, he has 5 elders who come and say the house of guardianship has to be erected, using 5 Baha'i women to be elected. Why is that women? Because it says Bab and Baha'u'llah. See, Bab and Baha'u'llah is like Adam and Eve. They think that Adam and Eve means man and women. And the Bible says in Genesis, created them, male and female, and he called them Adams. So the word Adams is both for the male and female, which means human being. Eve, he says, comes out of, as a rib, which means it's a relative. Like Imam Ali was the cousin of Muhammad, you know. So John the Baptist and others in the Christianity, they were the same thing. They were relative of the same Jewish people. In here, Bab is that Eve. And Bab, B-A-B, is 5. B is 2, A is 1, B is 2 means 5. Just like Baha, B is 2, H is 5, 1 is, A is 1, and another A at the end is 1 is 9. Baha is 9, Bab is 5. 9 for universal laws of justice, 5 Bab for that. Why Bab? Because Bab's 99% of his writing is all interpretations. He symbolizes the interpretive power. 90% of the writing of the Bab is interpretations. Did you know that? Yeah. So that is why in his name, why Bab? Because in the writing it says, Baha'u'llah and Bab will guide them. Not just Baha'u'llah and the Bab. Bab is present in the Baha'i faith. It is a spiritual power to guide. This is why there should be. So we continue. It's very important. In the same book that I just told you that, it's called Toghiyat Mubarakeh, printed in 1992 in I did not bring the page number. Yeah, page 562. In the same page, it says universal, the seat of universal laws of justice, Dar Tashri. He says Shoghi means Shoghi means branch, a branch of the world order of Baha'u'llah. Not all of it. It says that right there. So, what is it left to do? I'll bring you that too. As it is right now, Shoghi Effendi clearly says, I'm mentioning some salient features, the main features. In reality, it says that the future generation have to say this. What does they have to say? Very fundamentals. I quote again in the book, The World Order of Baha'u'llah, page 148. Quote, an attempt, I feel, should at the present juncture should be made to explain the characters and the function of the twin pillars that support these mighty administrative structures, the institution of guardianship and of the universal laws of justice. To describe in their entirety the diverse elements that function in conjunction with these two institutions is beyond the scope and the purpose of this general exposition of the fundamental verities of the faith. So I'm not going to explain that. It's beyond this. To define with accuracy and minuteness the features and to analyze exhaustively the nature of the relationship which, on one hand, bind together these two fundamental organs of the will of Abdul-Baha and connect on the other each of them to the author of the faith and the center of his covenant, is a task which future generation will no doubt adequately fulfill. Shoghi Effendi's job was what? Interpretation. We know that he cannot bring the new laws. Abdul-Baha says, I cannot bring the laws. They ask him about few laws. He says, it's up to universal laws of justice. So Shoghi Effendi's writing is interpretation. He says, I haven't done it all. How could, based on what exists from Shoghi Effendi, universal laws of justice continue forever to work? What Shoghi Effendi clearly says, I haven't done is beyond the scope of this. He says the relationship of these two fundamentals and how they are related to Abdul-Baha and and Baha'u'llah is something that future generation has adequately. So he says that I'm incomplete. I left it incomplete, you know. So another reason that there has to be a general guardianship. So and again, he's mentioning, so if these guardians are coming, they can interpret, which elders are included, and the rest, future, guardians. They're just ordinary people. They have only one essentiality, which is similar to Abdul-Baha. Not in any other aspect. Again, he says in the World Guard of Baha'u'llah, page 151. He may share with Abdul-Baha the right and obligation to interpret the Baha'i teaching. He remains essentially human and cannot, if he wishes to remain faithful to his trust, arrogate himself under any pretense whatsoever the right, the privilege, and the prerogative which Baha'u'llah has chosen to confer upon his son. Shoghi Effendi says, I'm just an ordinary guy. But he has said to his son, do not give it to me. The fact that the guardian has been specifically endowed with such power as he may need to reveal the purport and disclose the implications of the utterance of Baha'u'llah and of Abdul-Baha does not necessarily confer upon him a station co-equal with those whose word is called upon to interpret. I am called upon to interpret the writing of Abdul-Baha and Baha'u'llah, but that doesn't mean I'm co-equal to them. Then he goes on, he says, to integrity of these cardinal principles of our faith, the words and the deeds of the present, which is himself, and the future guardians must abundantly testify. But I have to give my own interpretation, made to do that. What Abdul-Baha Shoghi Effendi says here about not being co-equal to Abdul-Baha, I'm not questioning that. But it is not bringing Shoghi Effendi to my level. To say that, you're comparing the shepherd to a dog. I'm just a dog compared to Shoghi Effendi. One simple explanation. He's infallible, I'm not. When you say infallible, there can't be two infallibles. There's no two infinite. Unerring is a big word. Shoghi Effendi had that power. In fact, only I maybe enjoy 24 hours and I think, what a master he was. How like a stereogram he has put into writings, things only the elders, real elders will find it out. No one before can understand how to connect the dots. So, this is the reason for the universal laws of guardianship. That's Abdul-Baha why women are not in the universal laws of justice. It's just like a sun in the middle of the sky, the noontide. It will be abundantly clear and visible. The time has come. I'm telling you why. Because the women are the member of the universal laws of guardianship. Is there any difference in this? Yeah. When it comes to spirituality, it goes to the personal laws. For example, masturbation. For example, the charge of a man who raped his daughter. Women and men may not be comfortable on the same table to talk about these things. Baha'u'llah has understood this. God, he knows it. He says, are respecting both parties and genders. They have to do this, these guys have to do this. Universal laws of justice is the boss, is the head of the faith, but they have a leash in the hand of the universal laws of guardianship made out of women who have to see who the guardians are, invite them, use them, and use their intuitions and interpretations, and collectively together they, for example, say finally smoking should be forbidden or not. Their interpretation is not a law. It's just that they say fate stands on this, that smoking is forbidden, or beer can be drank. But it's not a law. But it's infallible. It's not infallible, it's authoritative interpretations. That universal based on that can legislate. I've been for 27 years talking to you about this. The only one fear I have, guys, I'm a guy shy, a coy. I can't talk to public, I tell you that right now. I will sweat and I can't talk, I can't say things. I've tried many times. Maybe Shoghi Effendi was like that too, I don't know. I can't give speeches to public. So I won't be coming in any appearance of anywhere anyhow. But my fear is that I did not convey my message to you. That's the only reason. This life, all what you see in the matter of the physicality is for me just an illusion. It's a cloth, it's a shirt, I take off and then I'm living in a digital world. It's natural, it's not man-made digitals. That's where everybody goes. Abdullah, Baha'u'llah has given this power to me. Now if you want to know if I'm an elder or not, 2 videos I've spoken already about my credential as an elder of God. Elder of God is just a man, remember. He has that intuition, he can interpret. I'm the only person has dealt with this subject and I've brought and solved it. Nobody else has. If this solution is good to you, if you think this is saves the Baha'i faith, saves the administration, the world order of Baha'u'llah, which needs to be with the faith, or else all of it, just like a domino effect, will fall down. Then use my email, guardianship@rogers.com, guardianship@rogers.com. Contact me if you have to ask questions. And come and help me. Let's do it. I have a plan. We can put this train on the rail to go. Bob says in the book of Bayan, Arabic Bayan, on the very first chapter, he says for 8 units of Bayan, which every unit is 19, as some of you know, which is 160, 8 times 20 is 160, minus 8 becomes 152. He says for 152 years, you are on the line. And after that, he says in Arabic, and sayrihi tahta jabun, from its pathway you're veiled from its path. You're gone astray. 1844 plus 152, 1996, the day I was excommunicated for saying this thing. At Shoghi Effendi is the hallmark of the Baha'i faith is that the freedom of expression. What did I say? That no one should talk to me. Am I so big that none of you understand really what am I saying? Although the system of God is always like that. He always knows that these things are coming ahead of time. In the case of Baha'u'llah, couple of 100 years ahead of time, he will come to say everything that mankind has to do. If not, they go through the First World War, Second World War, pandemic, Putin, and God knows what more. He's coming a shortcut. Give them a shortcut so you don't go through these things. So I know if you don't come, I'm not worried about it. You know? So you don't come. That's it. I've done my job. Believe me, the population of Earth is not your generation. There's billions and billions and trillions and quadrillions of coming and going. So it is for me to die and join the legends, because right now I'm like a sun. I burn you. But when I go away for 50 years, then the light comes and people will find out what to do, because the fate is dying and there's no answer. Then they come, the least you can do, save all these videos, because one day they can just go and vanish, all of you, if you can. And if you like further to help me, go at that guardianship02. We'll devise a plan we can do. Okay? God bless you. Allahu Akbar.